Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Steve Nussbaum, in the podcast where I invite my guests to come on and talk to me all about their musical taste, their memories, their experiences, and they get to create their fantasy festivals, which I have christened Fantastivals. After a week away, I hope everyone is doing well. I hope you all had a lovely May bank holiday and are now enjoying June. And before we start this one, I just want to shout out to everyone who I met last week at the Heavy North gig at the Water Rats in London. Heavy North were an absolutely superb live act. If you've not seen them yet live, please make sure you catch them whenever you can, because they are absolutely amazing live. And it was great to see A.D. Hansen, Moby Tanner, meet Sam Shiner, and meet so many of the guys who I've got to know through Twitter, and some of the guests who have been on this wonderful podcast. So a great night last week meeting the Heavy North. And also, before we start again, I'd like to say a massive thank you to Ed Cousins from Reverend and the Makers, who was on in episode 127 and was my last guest. And I'm delighted he got to see his beloved Sheffield Wednesday win promotion last week, as it looked like at the time we recorded that definitely wasn't going to happen. So amazing to see that happen. That was a great podcast. If you've not listened to that one, please go back into the vaults. That's episode 127 with Ed Cousins. But this episode is all about number 128. And this week I'm delighted to introduce onto the Fantastival Podcast singer, songwriter, got to say the rather prolific, it's Michael Forsyth.
Good evening, man. How's it going?
Yeah, all good. I'm so happy to have you finally on the Fantastival Podcast. I know we've been planning this for a while. It's great to have you here and really a good time in your musical career to come on and talk to me. So I'm very grateful for you for doing that. But before we talk music, Michael, I like to always talk to my guests about mental health. I think it's really important we talk about how we're doing, how we're feeling, and how everyone is. So Michael, mate, how are you?
I'm all good. Just keeping busy with work, trying my best to get my time to do my music and that. So yeah, everything's good at the moment.
Great to hear that, Michael. So let me take you back then. So what were your earliest musical memories? What do you remember about growing up and music?
Basically, my dad was a big influence on me. He played guitar and stuff. So he would be playing stuff like Streets of London, The City of New Orleans, Wind Beneath My Wings, Eagles. We had a record player in that, and he'd have like Bad Company on, Backham Turner Overdrive, Status Quo. Just a man obsessed with music. It's not a bad thing. We didn't have much as a family growing up, but music was one thing that kind of brought us all together. And that, obviously, you'll know my sister Kimberly, so she's music mad as well.
Yeah, I obviously had Kimbo on the podcast, and she was a great guest, and has been a real driver of new music in your music as well. And you know, you mentioned the Eagles there. I've seen her singing like the Eagles on social media, and really involved with music. So I mean, were you always inspired to pick up a guitar based on your dad playing, or was that something that kind of followed a few years after?
Basically, it was around about the time like 1997. I would have been about 11 years old, 12 years old, and it was through school mainly. Like there was this teacher, she was well into music, and on a Friday she'd let us do music, and just through that I just gauged a bit more interest and wanted to play an instrument and that. And my dad had visited his brother, and he came back that weekend with a guitar for me that he'd gotten from my uncle, and I was just, at that moment I was just hooked. I just started a cover band at school called Earth, and from like the age of 12 right until I was about 21, we were out gigging like every weekend. Really good times.
So tell me about Earth then, because I always like hearing about people's earlier musical adventures. What were Earth like? Indie? Were they rock? Were they Britpop? Because obviously you've mentioned getting that guitar in the 90s. So tell me a bit about Earth.
We honestly played everything for like Robbie Williams, Sex Pistols, Bryan Adams, Nirvana, Metallica, Thin Lizzy, just everything. It was in the Church of James, Oasis, Guns N' Roses. You know, you had to have quite a big catalogue of stuff to be able to play. So we were like practicing Thursday nights, Friday nights, just to get the set. We had about 3 hours worth of songs.
And were you singing as well, Michael? Were you like...
No, I was mainly just a guitar player back then. So it was me, a guy called Alan Shearer, he played the keyboards, and then a boy on the drums called Scott McDowell. And then we were later joined by a bass player and stuff. But it was good. It was great. Can't get a better teenage years, we were like 14, 15 when we first started playing in pubs. Like my dad and the other guys in the band's dads used to have to take us there and help us set up all our gear and that. And it was a great laugh with some great nights.
So musically, then what happens after Earth? Did Earth just kind of reach its natural conclusion, did it?
The guy that was the main singer, a guy called Alan, he left to go to uni, and I had started my apprenticeship at work, and I was working away a lot, and it just, like, our booking, we just had to kind of stop taking the bookings, if you know what I mean. It was too difficult to work in with him being at uni and me being away. And then one of my other mates, have you heard of Monza Express before, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, Deco, that plays the drums for Monza Express. He used to be in a band called The Usuals, and they were like one of Huntley's best bands, one of Aberdeen's best bands, in my opinion. They did like indie rock and that, and I was just obsessed with them. And through speaking to the singer from their band, he just says, "Look, why don't you go write your own songs?" He says, "Because if you muck it up," he says, "who's going to know?" So that's when I started basically writing my own stuff, and I've just done my own stuff since then. So that was like 2006 or something like that. So a long time.
Yeah, I was going to say, a long time. So I guess since 2016, has it kind of been a culmination of you kind of writing songs and then kind of perfecting your songbook, I guess?
It's just for me, it's just an escape from everything that's going on in life. You know, I could go to a guitar right now and probably come up with something in half an hour's time. I just love it. It's just my thing that I do.
So if someone's never listened to a track by Michael Forsyth, what are your influences? Who would you say you're kind of taking your inspiration from?
I draw a lot of inspiration from like Noel Gallagher, Richard Ashcroft, that sort of thing, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, Kelly Jones. I'll be honest, I try to keep listening to as much music as I can. I mean, I listen to stuff like even Marilyn Manson, Slipknot, just kind of heavier stuff like Eva Cassidy, just Creedence Clearwater Revival. Just try to broaden your horizons.
Absolutely, a wealth of kind of learning is being kind of put into your brain with that. So, Michael, you've been I think it's fair to say I introduced you as a fairly prolific songwriter. I guess I've kind of based that on your recent release activity, right? So you've released a single every Friday over the last 30 weeks. So it's a track a week over the last 30 weeks.
Yeah. I had stuff up before, so this is basically stuff that had been up before, but I'd taken it down to get it reworked and stuff. But I could have kept this up I wanted to do it for a year, but I thought 52 weeks was just too much for people. It was at the back of my mind to just keep going, but I thought, nah, I'm going to have to stop. And then I've got side projects as well that I do as well. So I've got another thing called Kaleidoscope Sky. That's got a single coming out on the 30th of June, I think it is. So I've got that as well. So I just like to write music, basically.
Okay. So, I mean, where did the idea... Obviously, you've got a lot of songs floating around. Like you've said, you know, you could have done it 52 weeks. Where did the idea to release a song every week come from? Did you get to that point where you're like, I've just got enough here to literally do one a week? That's what I'm going to try and do.
I just find it's so hard to keep people engaged. Kind of once a month, I don't think it's so difficult. Music's so easily accessible nowadays. Like 5 seconds later, you're forgotten about. Like my streams have gone up. My total streams over like the last 12 months is now up like 300% because I've done this. And it's a Mac, and you hardly make anything off streams, and it's to try and help pay for studio fees and that. I try to do as much as I can myself, but obviously there's times where you want to get someone else's ear to listen to it, you know what I mean? And for that you need the cash, you know, it's difficult. I feel really sorry for bands out there that don't have, that aren't working, for one. How are they ever going to, it's so difficult to go to a studio to pay for it and then make anything back off of it. It's so difficult. And I just felt that if I do this, maybe it might, and it has improved my streams. Like when I started in October, my monthly listeners on Spotify was like 3. I think it's at 150 this week, so it is slowly getting there.
And did you have the songs from 1 to 30 lined up, or was it a case of, right, I fancy doing this one this week, then we'll see what happens the week after? Did you have the kind of the 30 in your head, the way you were going to run it, or has it just kind of been as and when the song that felt right for that week?
I took a rough idea of how I'd previously released them, and then I just put it together on my Mac and just listened through and thought, that sounds okay to me. Just went for it. If people like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. You know, you can only try.
Absolutely. And so now, as we come to the kind of end of that period, there's an album. As we record this, the album isn't released yet. The album gets released tomorrow as we record this, but by the time people are listening to this, the album will be out. So you've got a self-titled album coming out. I think I've read that it's 12 tracks. That's 12. Is it 12 of the 30 tracks that have already been put out?
It's 12 of the 30 tracks that have already been put out. But I just felt it was important for me to pick what I would have, how I would have put it if I'd done it as an album. But it was good to get the engagement from the 30 songs.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, how does it feel with an album about to come out? I mean, you obviously these have come out as singles before. How are you feeling about it? Are you nervous? Are you excited? What are the emotions floating around in your body?
I would just really appreciate anybody to go and listen to it. And it's more of a learning curve because I've got other songs that I've got written and demos recorded, and I'm really hoping to have that. I'm playing the sessions in Manchester, so I'm going to do my set there is going to be my new album that I've got so it's basically a stepping stone to that coming out, just to gauge, try and get a bit more interest about myself.
Brilliant.
Hopefully.
Well, I'm sure the album will do really well. Like I said, it's not out as we record this, but by the time people are listening, straight after this podcast, they can go and have a listen to the album and all of the 30 singles. So if anyone wants to do that, Michael, how would they do it? Where would they find your music?
You'll get me on Twitter, basically, Facebook, Instagram and that, but you'll get the music will be available Spotify, you can all the normal music platforms, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Tidal, Deezer, YouTube Music, it's easy enough. At Michael Forsyth Music. Brilliant.
So Michael Forsyth Music is the place to go and the place to search if you want to find Michael. You mentioned Kaleidoscope Skies. That's new to me. Is that more of a fuller band? Is that like a band sound, or is that still kind of...
It's still just me, but it's more, I'd say it's more heavier than what I would normally do. It's more like Oasis-y and that's like Oasis. Smashing Pumpkins is another influence of mine. A lot more heavy stuff, which I really enjoy doing as well. It's just a break away from playing an acoustic guitar.
Brilliant. I look forward to hearing that later this month then. So you mentioned you're playing the sessions. Is there a plan to go out and do more live dates, or is it just going to be kind of see what happens and see what's available as and when?
I would like to go out and play more, but I just want to get everything sorted first. It's so difficult where I am getting other people to play with and everybody getting time to meet up and that, with work and that. I do have guys that can come and play with me in a band, but getting everybody together is just a nightmare. And rehearsal space and that in Huntly is just a nightmare. Just an absolute nightmare, but it will happen eventually. I hope.
Watch your space.
It'd be good to go to the sessions and maybe have a band that's maybe there. Say, hey, do you fancy doing support stuff? Because I'm always up for doing that.
Absolutely. Those sessions gigs in September look absolutely amazing. That'll be a great 2 nights of music there that are put on later in the year. So, you mentioned so many artists already in music, but in terms of, without giving away too many spoilers then, what are you into at the moment, Michael? Are you still into your indie and your Britpop stuff, or what's...
I like a lot of, I don't know if you've heard Greta Van Fleet, rock band, Dirty Honey, that sort of stuff. I've been listening to Bleach Lab. Have you heard them? They're really good. Who else? And there's a guy that I grew up with in Huntly. He's a couple of years older than me, called Interior Moon. You should really check out his stuff. It's just amazing. It's like Richard Ashcrofty. Really good. Listening to him. Meller, you'll have heard of them. They've got a great album. October Drift. That album just completely blew my mind. It's just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Then you've got people like Brown Bear. I listened to him. Another cracking album. And then you've obviously got Sylvie, who's just unique. Completely unique. She's going to go a long way. Distant Images, they're a cracking band as well. I just try my best to listen to heaps of stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned some great bands there, some past guests of the Fantastival podcast. I love October Drift. At the Heavy North, there was a guy wearing an October Drift t-shirt.
Oh, well, yeah. I met, they were playing at the last sessions and they did an acoustics. I had never seen them before. And the acoustic session was just fantastic. It was just so good.
They're amazing. If you ever get a chance to see October Drift live, it's quite the experience. They're an absolutely amazing band, one who everyone should go and check out. So, Michael, let me take you back to when you was a younger lad. Do you remember buying your first record or your first single?
Yeah.
and what they were?
Yeah, I do. It was actually Bryan Adams Unplugged, and I hadn't gone to buy Bryan Adams. I'd actually gone to buy Be Here Now by Oasis, but it sold out. It was just a little W.H. Smith and Huntley. So I went home with Bryan Adams Unplugged MTV instead. But hey ho.
That's quite the change from Oasis to take over Bryan Adams album.
Yeah. But we were playing a lot of like Bryan Adams and the cover band and that, you see, so it was good for that. It was good to learn the songs.
You don't have to you don't have to teach me about Bryan. I love Bryan Adams, one of my favourite acts in the entire world, and utter legend. Great first album then. So this is all about collating your fantasy festival, Michael. Obviously, festival season has now started. There's a lot of BBC One's Weekender just gone, which has picked up a lot of controversy due to Royal Blood's behaviour, and obviously we had Neighbourhood at the weekend that a lot of bands who I'm into have played. Are you a fan of festivals?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I've not really been to that many. Like there's ones round about us, like Wolfstock Festival and Joy Festival and that, Bella Drum and that, but I've never even been to Tea in the Park, never even been to that. I'm more of a gig goer than a festival goer, to be fair.
And in terms of gigs then, I always like to ask my guests this, and again, try not to spoil anything maybe for your fantasy festival, but do you have a favourite gig?
My wife is well into like her heavier stuff and that, so we went to see a band called Opeth. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Yeah, no, Opeth.
But that just completely blew my mind. It's just musically just unbelievable. The guitar playing is just out of this world. That's probably one of the best gigs I've ever been to.
Amazing. Opeth, I don't think I've ever been mentioned much on the Fantastival podcast, but obviously working in a record shop and in the days of these massive metal sections, I remember Opeth quite a lot, and their artwork was always an interesting artwork, dynamic covers, and all that. So like I said at the top of the podcast, it's all about getting our guests to collate their fantasy festival. So Michael gets to choose any 5 acts, one of who must play one of their studio albums in full, and Michael also gets to pick an encore, which all of his 5 acts can perform together at the end of his fantasy festival, which can be any song ever recorded by any artist in the world. So it's fairly straightforward for any first-time listeners. 5 acts get 5 time slots. So in the last episode of the podcast I mentioned earlier, I had Ed Cousins. He created his Eddie Steady Go Fantasy Festival. He put the Everly Brothers in his opening act slot. He followed them up with First Aid Kit. In his Midway Madness slot, he picked AC/DC, which is an amazing choice for Midway Madness. In his pre-headline slot, he picked Richard Hawley and had Richard play his album Low Edges in full. And for his headline act, he had Talking Heads play for 2.5 hours. And for his encore, Ed picked a medley from side 2 of Abbey Road that I just about let him choose there due to the Fantastival gods smiling down upon him. So before we talk about the band you're going to pick, Mike, and the acts, should I say, first of all, we need to give your fantasy festival a name and we need to give it a venue. So Michael, what are you going to call your fantasy festival?
The Colour of Sound.
I like that. And what's the thinking behind that?
I don't know, it just came.
Great stuff. So we've got The Colour of Sound, and you can hold this anywhere you like in the world. You can take us to Scotland, you can take us to Aberdeen. Obviously, I know Kimbo's a massive Aberdeen fan. I'm not sure if you are, I presume you might be as well. Or you can take us anywhere you like to go. We'll follow you for The Colour of Sound. So Michael, where are you going to hold your fantasy festival?
So my father-in-law owns an old farmhouse. It's at the middle of nowhere, and he owns a field. So it would be in a place called Weedlemont in this field. And it's just like you're surrounded by hills and beautiful nature, and it would just be great.
Awesome.
And you could make as much noise as you wanted.
Brilliant. All right, so we're going to a field in Weedlemont. I think I've said that right.
Weedlemont, yeah.
Well, yeah, please let them know I haven't. Awesome. So we've got our name, we've got a venue. Before we talk about our 5 acts, are there any who you want to mention, Michael, who you love, but for other reasons just aren't making it into your fantasy festival lineup?
There's lots of like unsigned bands that I would have like had. October Drift, for example, they would have been a great opening act. Arcade State is another one that would have been great. Sylvie would have been great. This is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to be honest. So many. You just think, God, who could have had? And so difficult.
That's the joy of the fantasy festival. I guess only having 5. There can only be 5, which makes it difficult. So you mentioned some fantastic names who aren't coming with us, but have been on the podcast before. So let's see where we go then. So 2:00, Colour of Sound Festival is rammed. It's a lovely day. The field is buzzing. Time for your opening act. So Michael, who are you going to have open the Colour of Sound?
Sun Zoom.
Okay. So I know of Sun Zoom, but not too well. So I guess why Sun Zoom for you? And I guess tell us a bit about the act themselves.
I first heard his music about a year and a half ago, and it's just brilliant. It's just honestly up there with the greats. I don't know if you should, if you haven't listened to him, you should really go out and check out his album. It's just brilliant. Every song is cracking. Every single song. I just love it. I could listen to it for 24 hours.
And who?
Just love his music.
Who does he sound? I've heard a few tracks, but who would you say he sounds like? Who's he remind you of?
Well, when I first heard it, I was like, "Is this Paul Weller in disguise?" type thing. Like the music, the melodies in it, the instruments that are used. It's just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. There's one song especially called "Anytime Soon," and like the outro bridge and that. It's just it's one of the greatest pieces of music I've ever heard in my life. Just brilliant. You should really check it out. Check him out.
Wow, will do. High praise indeed. So Sun Zoom makes his Fantasy Festival debut. He's going to open our Colour of Sound Festival. He's going to play from 2 till 3 o'clock. We'll take a half-hour break, and then we'll be back at 3:30 for our super second act. So they get from 3:30 to 4:30 to follow Sun Zoom. So Michael, who are you going to have in your super seconds act?
I'm going to go with Ocean Colour Scene.
Oh, great shout. So Ocean Colour Scene, obviously a band, well, we've had Damon Minchella on before, who was the bass player in Ocean Colour Scene. A great lad. It's his birthday today, so happy birthday to Damon as we record this. So why Ocean Colour Scene, Michael?
Because I'd always had older friends that were well into them and that, and I never had the opportunity to see them. And then Kimberly took me to see them at Aberdeen Music Hall, and it's just what a band. Craddock on guitar is just unbelievable. Just such a musician. Just absolutely brilliant. Just loved loved it all.
And I guess they've got a wealth of music.
Oh, they've
now,
got a
haven't
wealth
they?
of tunes, and just kind of like The Circle, Line in Your Pocket, what else? David Cott, just brilliant.
Great shout.
Just a brilliant band.
Absolutely are. And believe it or not, this is the first time they've ever been chosen for a fantasy festival. So they've broken their fantasy festival duck. They're going to make their debut in your super second slot. So they're playing from 3:30 till 4:30. We'll take another half-hour break, and then that will take us to 5 o'clock. It'll be time for your Midway Madness act. So 2 acts down, 3 left to go. So Michael, who are you going to have play your Midway Madness slot?
I'm going to have Kelly Jones, and he's going to do his album Don't Let the Devil Take Another Day.
Oh, great shout. So Kelly Jones is obviously frontman for Stereophonics, unless anyone doesn't know that. Stereophonics have only ever been chosen once on this podcast. Kelly's never been chosen as a solo act. So why Kelly as opposed to Stereophonics, and why that album?
I had never ever seen Stereophonics. I saw Kelly Jones before Stereophonics, and I'd watched the documentary about him losing his voice and having to regain all his whole, basically his life. And when I went to see him, it was at Dundee. It was at Dundee, and it was just an outstanding musician, and an album that really got me through quite a difficult time. It was when Kimberly had cancer and that. Just brilliant, just on a different level. One of the best singers in my opinion.
And an amazing songwriter as well, right? So
he's got so many songs. It's just I couldn't name a bad song that he's ever wrote.
Amazing. So Kelly Jones, Don't Let the Devil Take Another. Is that the live album?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a few covers in there as well, right? If I remember that right. So it's basically a Stereophonics greatest. His solo stuff and some covers.
Stripped back, but it's just awesome.
Yeah, that is an amazing album. And again, it really kind of, for me, highlights his songwriting and his vocal range, because there's some, incredible songs in that. So great choice there, Michael. Kelly Jones is coming. He is going to play Don't Let the Devil Take Another Day for us from 5 till 6. So 3 acts down, 2 to go. Half-hour break will follow Kelly Jones. That takes us to 6:30. And then your pre-headline act will get an hour and a half to follow Kelly Jones. So who are you going to have in your pre-headline act, Michael?
I'm going to have Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds.
Awesome. So Noel Gallagher, again, been in the news a lot. He's got a new album out, as people will be listening to this, a recent album release that I'm really excited about. So I guess my questions for you then is, why Noel Gallagher, and I guess not Oasis? And what's you mentioned Noel Gallagher as a songwriting influence. I guess what does Noel mean to you?
I just, back when it was the video for, Do You Know What I Mean? You know the video when he's standing with the flying V?
Oh, yeah.
And that's when I first got into them, and it's just this whole, his catalogue of songs is just, there'll never be another. And I was very lucky to actually get to see Oasis in Manchester in 2005. It's when they had Don't Believe the Truth had just come out, and it was absolutely awesome, but I would never want to see them reunite again, ever. I think that was their time, and I think what he's doing on his own is just brilliant. And I think what Liam's doing on his own is brilliant as well, but I would never want... I just think they would ruin what they created, basically.
I think they're quite aware of that. I definitely get the impression Noel was quite aware of that, but I can't quite work out if they're playing everyone, because there's this act. Obviously, it's quite well known or common knowledge that they both do not like each other. But behind that, there's always like rumours that, I read on the other day that Nebworth 25 has already been booked out for Oasis, and there's all these rumours all the time. So I hope. I'm a bit like you. For me, I'm not interested in seeing them back together. I had the pleasure of seeing Noel Gallagher before lockdown at the London Palladium do his solo gig, and there was enough Oasis in there to kind of get me through that without wanting Oasis to come back. And as a solo performer, I think he's great. So I guess what would you have then? He only gets an hour and a half. What essential Noel Gallagher songs would you want to hear in his slot at The Colour of Sound?
A lot of the stuff off his first album, Everybody's on the Run, If I Had a Gun. There's so much,
Yeah. I mean, he's
so
got
much.
He's got a wealth.
Holy Mountain and that, he's a powerhouse of song.
He is a powerhouse. I mean, an Oasis song that I never really got into, but it came on XFM last night when I was driving home, was Sad Song. And I was like, wow, this is actually really, that's an amazing... might as well be a Noel Gallagher solo tune, but I listened to that on the way back last night, and it came on the radio. I was like, I've not heard this in a couple of years. This is an awesome track, standalone. So he's got a wealth of material he will bring to us. And Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds, first time Noel Gallagher's been picked as a solo artist as well. So you've literally got 4 new additions on the Fantastival roster so far, Michael. We're going great guns here. Noel Gallagher is playing from 6:30 till 8 o'clock. We'll take one more break, and it'll be time for your headline act to finish off The Colour of Sound. So we've had 4 great acts so far. But Michael, who's going to headline your fantasy festival?
I'm going to have to go with The Verve.
Great stuff. So again, The Verve, a band who mean a lot to loads of people on this podcast. They were actually only chosen for the first time a few weeks ago when Dean Dovey picked them in his pre-headline slot. So the first time they're headlining a fantasy festival. So I guess, Michael, why The Verve, your headline act?
I just love the whole vibe, the way that the guitar and that Nick plays. It's just a wall of sound, just absolutely brilliant. And then Cy Jones and that, it's just, I got the chance to see them when they brought out Fourth, and that is such an underrated album. It's they've obviously got Storm in Heaven and that, Urban Hymns obviously, but that album Fourth is just full of brilliant tunes like Love Is Noise, Appalachian Springs. They're such a great band. I think they were actually bigger than Oasis, to be fair.
So for you,
in my opinion,
in
my
opinion, I was reading about them, I think last week, that it was the 25th anniversary of their big Wigan gig at Hay Hall. When you look back and you're like, wow, that was 25 years ago. I mean, I remember that was back in the day where a live gig would go out live on Radio 1, and I remember listening to that live on Radio 1, and I think it was on BBC 1 on a Sunday night, like straight after, and like videoing that on my video recorder back in the pre-internet days and pre-YouTube days, and it looked like an absolutely like insane gig to be at.
Yeah, you just like songs like Star Sail and Blue. They've got so much great songs as well.
Yeah, and he's still going, right? So Ashcroft is still a man on a mission.
Definitely. Like he's one of my other favourite songwriters, but he's got even his own materials just brilliant. The string work and that, and the songs, the melodies, it's just brilliant.
Great stuff. So The Verve are headlining The Colour of Sound. So they're going to play from 8:30 to 11 o'clock. Then at 11 o'clock, they're going to call back on stage Noel Gallagher and his High Flying Birds, Kelly Jones, Ocean Colour Scene and Sun Zoom, back on stage at 11 o'clock. They all get to play one song of your choice, Michael. So they're all looking at you, up and down. You're the conductor of this one. What are you going to have your Fantasy Festival act play to end your Fantasy Festival?
Let It Be by the Beatles, because it's one of the greatest songs ever written, in my opinion.
That's fair enough. I mean, that's pretty comprehensive. There's no follow-up question from me without. I mean, you've kind of summed it up there, like in terms of why that's your encore. All right, so before we lock this in, I obviously know your sister fairly well. She's been a guest. I did message her beforehand and said, who do you think Michael's going to pick? So I went back to my early days of the podcast and tried to get predictions from a fellow listener. Yeah. So Kimbo came back to me at a pretty decent roundup. So she said, you will find out Michael has the most mixed choice of music. I can't guess them all, but I think Blackstone Cherry would get a mention. So I don't think we've mentioned Blackstone Cherry so far. She went on to say Richard Ashcroft, I would say, and The Verve. He'll probably throw in some heavier acts in there as well, like Kiss or like Alter Bridge. He also loves the Foo Fighters. It's all far too hard, she said with a smiling emoticon. So she got Ashcroft and The Verve. I mentioned a few heavier acts who haven't got in to your lineups there. But 1 out of 5 for Kimbo. That's not bad, I'd say.
Yeah, I'll let her off.
Do you want to give a Blackstone Cherry, Kiss, Alter Bridge, Foos? Just not making it?
Like I've seen Blackstone Cherry and that. They're a great band. They are an important band in my life. But yeah, I just don't feel they belonged in that sort of lineup. I wrote this thing out about 4 times.
It's amazing. It's always interesting to speak to people a couple of months after they've been on the podcast. So I think Paula, obviously a friend of Kimbo's and a friend of the podcast, said the other week that her lineup now would be totally different to what she'd picked back at the time she'd done it. So, like I said, a great lineup that will lock into the Fantastival Vaults Hour before you change your mind. So we've got The Colour of Sound taking place at a field in Wiedemont. Open act, we've got Sun Zoom, Super Secca's Ocean Colour Scene, Midway Madness, Kelly Jones playing his album Don't Let the Devil Take Another Day in full. Pre-headline act, we've got Noel Gallagher. Headlining, we've got The Verve, and for your encore, they're all going to play Let It Be. Sounds like an amazing lineup to me, Michael. You happy to lock that one into the vaults?
Yeah, happy with that.
Amazing. Brilliant stuff. So I guess before we end this one then, obviously the album has just recently been released. What do the next couple of months, what does, I guess, the rest of 2023 look like for you? What are your hopes for the rest of the year?
Really hoping to get my next album finished and get what I'm going to have as my singles sorted out, and hopefully pick up a couple more gigs, hopefully, and put in a bit more practice when I can as well.
Is there going to be? Are you trying to get? Is there going to be like a physical release of the album, or as it stands, is it just going to be streaming only? What are you trying to do with the album?
I would love to do a physical release, but I'm going to have to see money funds, obviously. Cool. At the moment, my family comes before
absolutely.
The music.
Absolutely. Okay, so the album, like we said, will be available and the rest of the singles on all good streaming platforms. So go and have a look for Michael Forsyth. Let's shout out your social media again, Michael. So if anyone's listening and isn't aware of how to find you, let's tell them where they can find you and the handles that you use, Michael. So where do people find you?
So you'll find me on Twitter at wait till I remember.
It's always difficult talking about yourself and your own Twitter handle.
M Forsyth Music at M Forsyth Music, and you'll get me on that on everything, Instagram, etc., Facebook, and that.
Great stuff. Go and check Michael out. He's got a wealth of great tunes there that I'm sure everyone listening will enjoy. So that's it. Thanks to everyone for listening to the 128th episode of the Fantastival Podcast. If you've enjoyed this one, please subscribe. You can do that on iTunes. You can also review the podcast on iTunes. And if you're listening on Spotify, very important to go and rate the show. So if you're listening on Spotify, stop the podcast, rate the show, and you can also give your feedback on any episodes in particular by going onto any episode description. So please make sure to do that. So like we said, Michael is on social media, so is the podcast. So you can find us at Fantastival P on Twitter, and you can also find the podcast on TikTok, where the numbers are starting to go up on TikTok without me doing much. So if you are on TikTok and aren't following the podcast already, please do so. And if you're not on Twitter or TikTok, give us an email at fantastivalpodcast@outlook.com. Unfortunately, on this podcast, we can't play any music, but I'll get some tracks off Michael, and we'll make a nice little Spotify playlist from his episode, which will be in your episode description of all the acts Michael has spoken about in this episode. So, Michael, a massive thank you for being my 128th guest on the Fantastival Podcast. How have you found it?
That was really good, but it's still really difficult to choose. No, honestly, thank you for the chance to do it and for helping me, hopefully, promote my album a little bit as well. Honestly, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm looking really forward to hearing the album and those 12 tracks in full, in order, once the album is out. So I'm looking forward to that and wishing you all the best of luck with the album, and looking forward to seeing what the rest of the year holds for you. You mentioned some really exciting stuff with the sessions, with the forthcoming releases as well. So I'll be keeping a close eye on you there. So I will be back next week with episode number 129. So please make sure to join me for that one. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word, and that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.